In this video, we're going to take what we know about solving linear equations and we're going to apply them to an absolute value equation. But first, quick review, just in case you forgot what absolute value meant. Remember, those are the ones that look like they have like bars and like usually like a number inside. Okay. So like for example, if I said absolute value of one of the common misconceptions is that whatever's inside the absolute value bars becomes switches signs. Like for example, over here, if I were to ask you absolute value of -1, most students will remember that the absolute value of -1 is +1, okay? But keep in mind, the absolute value means how far is that number away from 0. That's what it technically means. So it doesn't mean we're just switching signs. So for absolute value of +1, that is still a distance of 1 away from 0, okay? So the absolute value of 1 is still 1. You can kind of think it like as whatever's inside those absolute value bars, we make positive. But the trouble with this is notice we have two different scenarios that are giving us the same answer. So when we apply this to an equation, we have to keep that in mind. So for example, if I were to ask you what's the absolute value of x, let's see for now, absolute value of x, let's say it's equal to 1. Okay, my question would be, what values of x could you plug in there to get the answer of 1 to make it work? The answer is that there's two solutions, right? So there's two solutions that you could plug in here. You could plug in -1 and you could plug in 1. So that's the thing you have to be careful of is when you're dealing with these absolute value equations, there's two scenarios. There's always a positive case and a negative case. So when you're solving an absolute value equation, you have to do both, okay? Other than that, the actual like steps are exactly the same as what we've been doing with solving equations. Okay, let me show you a quick example. All right, if I were to ask you what the absolute value of x minus 1 equals 2, and I want you to solve for x, okay? Now, at first glance, the actual equation is not too difficult. It's like a one-step equation. But the absolute value bars make it a little more challenging. So the things you have to watch out for is make sure that the absolute value bars are isolated. They're alone, which they are. They're on the left-hand side of your equation. No other pieces attached to it. So then from there, what you can do is you can split it up into two cases, okay? I'm gonna color code mine. So you can split it up into two different cases. Okay, and I'll write that out. Split into two cases, okay? For the positive case, let's say we just did that one over here. For the positive case, you don't change a thing. You just write down exactly what it is, just without the absolute value bars. So our equation would be x minus 1 equals 2. Again, don't change a thing, okay? For the negative case, okay, the absolute value part's not going to change, so it's still x minus 1. But because we have to account for the negative, what we'll do is whatever's on that left-hand side, we'll put in parentheses, and then we'll put a negative in front of it, okay? If there was more than one thing on the right-hand side, then that's why the parentheses are there. You'd have to distribute that negative, okay? But then now it's a pretty basic equation. So let's go back to that positive case. It's a one-step equation, so the opposite of a -1 is +1. Do that to both sides. Again, you can draw that line if it's helpful. So our answer, we get x is equal to 3. Now, all of the equations we've been doing so far, we've only had one answer, so you'd be done. With the absolute value one, you have to provide the two cases, the two answers. So you have to keep going with this one. Now, this one looks a little bit strange because I put the parentheses on there. So let's go ahead and fix that. So x minus 1, and apply the negative to the 2, so just -2. Now it's a bit more organized. Okay, so now we can get rid of that 1, right? Opposite of -1, it's the same step as the other equation, +1. both sides, but we are going to get a different answer. Okay? -2 plus 1 is -1. So that is another answer. Okay? In order to get the question correct, you have to provide both of those answers. Okay, if you only provide one of them, that's only half. Okay, so always keep in mind with absolute value equations, the idea is to split them up into both the positive case and the negative case. Other than that, the solving equation part is exactly the same as what we've been doing. Okay, let's try one more. It's a little bit more challenging, and then I do want you to try one on your own. Okay, let's say I gave you the equation, the absolute value of x minus 2, but then I'm going to put some stuff in here. Plus 3 equals 5. Okay. Now for this example, this is what I was kind of mentioning, that you have to have the absolute value bars by themselves before you do the splitting up part. Okay. So we actually have to do a little bit of work ahead of time in this equation because that positive 3 is kind of in the way. Okay. So you have to isolate absolute value bars. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that 3 first. Pretty easy, it's not that difficult. Opposite of a positive 3 is minus 3. Whatever you do to one side, do to both. Okay. So our new equation is we have the absolute value of x minus 2, and 5 minus 3 gives us 2. All right, now that both those bars are by themselves, now we can split the equation up into the two cases. Okay, so again, positive case, don't change a thing. X minus 2 equals 2. Negative case, just change that right-hand side to be negative. Sorry, not absolute value. Let me erase that real quick. So we have x minus 2. Now we're changing that to a negative 2. Again, that's the only difference between these two. Positive case, negative case. Okay. And then we can solve them separately. Again, these are easy equations. They're one-step equations that everyone should be confident with. Okay. So on the left-hand side, we can go plus 2. And we get the answer of x equals 4. That's one answer. On the other equation, same thing. The steps are the same. Get rid of that negative 2 by adding it. Okay. And some students are still getting kind of mixed up with the negatives and positives. So be careful. So we have x by itself. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. And remember, 0 is a perfectly acceptable number, just like everything else. Okay. So our two answers are 0 and 4. Okay. And that's essentially it for today, right? So isolate the absolute value bars, and then you can solve each equation separately. Make sure for the negative case to apply that negative to it. All right, I want you to try one on your own, and then we'll be done with today's video. All right, it's going to look a little bit more challenging, but the same concepts are going to be applying. So let's say absolute value 2x minus 1 minus 3 equals 2. Okay? All right, so go ahead and pause the video, try it out, and then press play to check your answer. All right, hopefully you have your two answers ready to check. So again, first you have to isolate. Let's go ahead and move this over here. Remember opposites. So absolute value 2x minus 1. And 2 plus 3 is 5. Now we can split it up. Okay, positive case, don't change a thing. 2x minus 1 equals 5. Negative case, just change that right-hand side. 2x minus 1 equals -5. And then solve each equation separately. So let's go and add 1. Again, hopefully you've already tried this. I'm going kind of quick. So we have 2x equals 6. There's that line if you need it. And then to get rid of that 2, we divide. So our first answer is 3. Okay? Repeat the process over here. So let's get rid of that 1. Draw our line down the middle. +1 both sides. Be careful with your positives and negatives. Then we're -5 plus 1 would be -4. And then divide by 2. So our second answer is -2. Okay. And again, you do have to get both of those answers to have a complete correct answer. Okay.